The conversation that's surrounding augmented reality has to do with the technological advancements and that which helps enhance the user experience, whether you are playing a video game or whether you're an industrial field technician. And these advancements are also challenging developers to take these new tools and to come up with the next killer application. Some of the interesting terms you'll hear today that I heard earlier when I was talking to the panelists are words like persistent AR, volumetric capture, spatial narratives, photogrammetry for AR, web AR, shared AR, just to name a few. So we're going to also explore today where augmented reality is heading into the future and entertainment and other industries. And our panel is so deeply immersed in AR, and they're exceptional. So we're going to start with Clay, and Clay's going to introduce himself, please, and tell us a little bit about your company and how you're involved in the augmented reality experience.
Great. My name is Clay Weishauer. I'm a creative director and prototyper and AR experience designer at Tool of North America. We're a production company based out of Santa Monica, and we explore immersive entertainment in the context of advertising. And we do a lot of large-scale AR installations, which involve kind of taking a physical space and then activating that through augmented reality and telling a story as you move through the space.
Awesome. Okay, Pete.
My name is Pete Peterson. I've spent the last 20 years on the technology side, and mostly around communication. So I'm a little bit skewed to the rest of the panel here that's more creative. I've spent the last couple of years with Deutsche Telekom working on augmented reality over 5G and looking at how can we utilize the new networks that are going to cost billions of dollars and activate AR over them. Most of that to date has been done with drones, and we're using that as a proxy for humans and very highly mobile, high speeds, low speeds, and figuring out how can we take the camera feeds off drones, augment them, and share them across multiple users. And we have got a lot of technological advancements. We've got a lot of technological problems that we're looking to solve. But the goal is that everybody could have a pair of glasses not dissimilar to these and walk down the street and engage with all sorts of personalized augmentations everywhere at any time.
Sounds awesome. Ariella.
I'm the president of HitPoint Studios. We're about 25 engineers in Western Mass and a small group of designers in LA. We work on hard technical problems. We're working on our 5th project with Google, for example, in the AR space. So they've been one of our big partners. Lenovo, we've worked on retail applications of AR, toy applications of AR, game applications of AR, location-based applications of AR. So sort of across the divide there. Yes, so we got started in AR with a Google project on Project Tango, and that was a couple of years ago, and that just sort of jump-started our work in the space.
Neil.
My name is Neil Paris, and I'm based down here in LA at Google, and I'm on the immersive computing team overseeing all of our entertainment partnerships across AR and VR. And so at Google, we believe in immersive computing as kind of the next big wave in computing. You had the mainframe, the PC, mobile, smartphone, and now immersive computing. And what we are investing in on AR and VR and across Lens are kind of the foundational investments that are going to help us get to the point where you are interacting with your computing in a much more natural way, which we think will be more immersive and a richer experience. Our involvement in AR is that we've just developed and launched AR Core, which is kind of the AR layer of Android. It's currently available on 130 million Android phones. We're aiming for 250 million phones by the end of the year, and following that, pretty much all mid and high tier Android phones. And so that, coupled with Apple and ARKit, I think we're at a point where AR is about to saturate the market.
Well, that might get to our tipping point question when we get to that shortly, but I do this panel every 6 months here at Digital Hollywood, so when I think of what's new in AR, I'm always thinking 6-month chunks. So that's why I'm going to ask the question of what is new and exciting in the AR world in the last 6 months? Anyone can start.
I mean, I think I just touched on it. The launch of ARKit and AR Core is kind of, I think, the thing that'll start the ramp up where now the technological layer is there to kind of build AR experiences at scale. Now it's really on developers and Google and Apple working with developers to figure out the right use cases. Where I'm very focused on entertainment, so a lot of that is around self-expression and social, but all of the verticals that you just mentioned, location-based, shopping, these are verticals where AR has huge potential, but it hasn't yet been tapped because the use cases, experiences aren't there yet.
Yeah, I'm constantly finding that the tech isn't quite where I want it to be as a storyteller. So I'm really excited with cloud anchors, which allow for shared AR experiences. I think augmented reality is a lot better when it's shared. It's people's sort of natural tendency when they see a fantastical object in space to look to one another to validate it. So this shared AR experience, when you see a dinosaur running around and you look at your friend, the fact that they can see it is a very powerful thing.
Well, on the cellular front, there's a lot of things that are happening in the past 6 months. You've probably heard about 5G and the announcements of carriers, AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, which is one of the Deutsche Telekom properties, but we have other ones overseas, all announcing deployment plans which cost billions of dollars. So the commitments to that's going to be huge for AR, especially when you think about kind of a common area AR. And so that's very big. We have significant advancements in glass product. Everyone who's familiar with Google Glass, that's very popular. But the field of views, the amount of augmentations you get into glasses, and the weight and the capabilities of the glasses have significantly increased. And then the last one I'm very excited about is the commitments to what we call network edge compute. And the idea here is that to put fancy and elaborate and shared augmentations into your glasses, it takes more compute power than you could strap onto your head or batteries that you want to carry on your back. And the networks, the carriers, the cellular players, but also the big kind of hyperscale compute companies independently and in some cases together have all made commitments to deploying a new kind of compute architecture, which we call edge compute, where some compute is put on the phone, some is in the cloud as you have now with your apps, but there will be an intermediate stage that is a bigger computer that is closer to you, where renders and shared renders can be created and then streamed to users. So these things have all been committed to, and we'll be able to start to design and roll out services based on those commitments.
I think one of the exciting things is this idea that AR is going to be increasingly integrated into the apps and things that we use every day. Because what I have found as a developer, we have a number of AR apps on both ARKit and ARCore, and people just don't download them. Even the most successful titles on, for example, Apple's big launch with ARKit actually didn't make much money, and I know that because I spoke to the developers, and they were, endlessly promoted. But people, so when you talk about tipping point, it's like the reality is out there. People don't know what AR is, the majority of people, and then to get people to download an app of any type in the iTunes Store or Google Play Store is really challenging these days. We all know our own behavior, right? Wait, am I going to download this? I don't have enough space on my, my computer, on my phone. So the idea that one of the things that was announced at Google I/O, the developer conference where I was 10 days ago, was this idea of WebXR, which is once AR is integrated into Chrome, then you're going to be able to experience AR. You'll just be or your camera. The other thing we need is a standard AR icon, right? So you look at a movie poster, it has the AR icon on. Oh, there's an AR experience there. You hold up your camera and you get the experience, and you don't have to download some special app, in order to get that experience, because that's a big obstacle now. So anyway, I'm excited because we really are getting close to that point. One of the things Google showed, which I thought was incredibly cool, how when you navigate, you open up your Google map, you're walking, and they tell you to go northeast, and you're like, I'm in a strange city. I have no idea which direction is northeast. But now you have this little character who pops out on your map, and he's walking.
You're seeing the real world as opposed
and you're
to
seeing
just
the
a map.
real world, and this little character walking on the street right in front. Oh, I'm going to follow that character, and it's as cute as can be. So anyway, I am excited about this idea of these kinds of experiences being integrated into the tools that we use every day.
Well, I wasn't going to admit this, but I am a Pokemon Go player. And I continue to play, but you never heard that here. Strike that. I'm only kidding. But when I first started playing, and that's how it got me on this panel, I was so enamored with it, with the augmented reality of it, that I just was tickled. And I played it that way for a long time. And I don't anymore in AR mode. But I bring that up because I was bringing up the question of, are we at the tipping point or not? 6 months ago, a year ago, I was asking that very question, which I'm going to now bring up one more time. We're getting a little bit of a hint of it. But I got a lot of mixed results before. I thought that because it was now sort of commercialized and I could play it with Pokemon Go, and there's Snapchat, that it's really tipped. And I still get, though, mixed results when I ask that question again. So I'm going to ask it of our panel here. Do you think we're before, at, or not yet to the tipping point of really where this is commercialized? And it's not just for entertainment, but also industrially and for other applications.
I think we're at an interesting point in that, as I mentioned, like we're about to have 1 billion phones that are AR capable, but we still need the experiences that then drive the users, to your point, into AR. So we're much closer to getting there, but we're not fully there yet.
When do you think we'll be at the tipping point? 6 months from now, again, a year from now, more?
It's hard to say. I know how hard the technological barriers were to get to this point, so I feel like we've achieved a lot to get here. And we're working really hard and closely with developers to build out these experiences, which we think will resonate. And none of them are it's just not as obvious as you would think. Like the maps thing, that may be an obvious one, but it was really hard to build. And I don't know, I guess within 6 months we'll probably see a few more breakthrough things. In a year or two, I think we'll start to see breakthroughs at scale.
So we started to see early adopters in the enterprise segment. And so it's not in the B2C and the entertainment side,
right.
But we're seeing one of the big ones that's taking off is the remote expert. And we're seeing a change in the way people are trained, millennials versus boomers, and education backgrounds. And in many of the trades, expertise is aging out. And so industries are looking at how do we still be effective, and how do we bring in lower skilled workers to still execute the tasks. And so from all the way from Germany to the United States and other places, we're already bringing out remote expert, remote maintenance, where a lower end technician can go out. He has some sort of camera platform, whether it's glasses or other platforms. A remote technician, an expert, can see what he's doing. He can pull up manuals, he can pull up illustrations, he can throw that into the glasses or into the device. It can be a 2D experience for the technician, and see instructions and even start to do things around the AI space, capturing activity, looking where mistakes are, looking at process and flow. And we're also looking at things about audit. So if you're, let's say, in the trades, some things we're looking at and dealing with are assembling things like engines and other high-value things. So they want to know that it was done properly. And so now you as the manufacturer can go back and say, yes, we have audit that these things were done. Everything was in the right process, done to the right tolerances, and capturing all this data flow. So we're seeing that now. It's expensive. So it's not something that you jump into by buying a $500 phone. You're looking at $5,000 to kind of get in per person. But those things are already starting to take off.
Yeah, a lot of the applications of HoloLens initially were kind of industrial applications targeting that. And I think what was just mentioned is kind of becoming more accessible to the public. I don't know if you guys have used Vuforia Chalk at all. It's pretty cool. Like I could, call up my dad, who's an expert at putting together IKEA furniture, and through Vuforia Chalk, he could kind of like circle, little pieces, highlight things, and sort of collaborate with me over an app that's already available in the App Store to sort of instruct me on how to build this really poorly made coffee table.
Well, there are, the 5 biggies are just plus Snap are just pouring endless amounts of money into this technology. I mean, if you look at Amazon, they just released
Sumerian.
Sumerian, plus now you can look at a product, you can envision the product, your toaster on your kitchen counter.
Like IKEA's.
Yes, like IKEA's. I mean, you know, so you have Amazon, Facebook's doing some really important things in AR. Microsoft, obviously. HoloLens is 2 years old, and it's probably still the best head-mounted display out there. You know, so you have obviously Google and Apple, so you have so much effort and energy being poured into this that I think that it's pretty clear that it's going to be mainstream sooner rather than later. But I, you know, as I sort of said before, I don't view it at the tipping point yet. I think it's, if you look at what has occurred to date, when people play Pokemon, mostly they turn off the AR because it burns their battery, right? These AR experiences are killers on your battery. And what we've seen with ARKit and ARCore in the Play stores is that it's just, you know, there's not, part of the problem is that there's not good retention with any of these apps. And partly that's because we haven't had multiplayer, and there's certain features that we just haven't had access to yet, but there's not good retention. People, I can tell you from our own experience, people play your app, you know, 10 minutes and they're done with it, and they don't come back. So, you know, we have to fix that, and we need some more tools. So, for example, when we first started working on Google Tango, we had 2 cameras and infrared, and we were really able to sense depth in a way that, you know, maybe on the latest Apple phone you get a little bit of that, but think about it. You know, we know where the floor is. Now we know on both of those devices where the vertical walls are, and we can make estimates, but we don't really have a good way of knowing that that chair is there. You cover it with a mesh, but it's not very good yet. And so until we understand in a better way, or like HoloLens does with the head-mounted display, where things are in your environment, it's hard to design a game for any environment because you don't actually know what's out there.
Actually, a 30-year video game artist. I worked on a lot of VR experiences. Where is the industry at with, you know, object recognition? Because one of the biggest problems is with AR is having a ball inside your hand and trying to recognize the hand. Well, if it's like this, you know, is it the left hand or the right hand, and where's the ball? Have we made any advancements on shape and pattern recognition to a level that the phones can currently process that kind of information?
I mean, they're working.
Yeah.
They're working hard on it,
Yeah.
and
where
it's
do
a
you
very
think that would be?
complicated.
You know, where do you think the phones will be at technologically to handle and process the kind of data you're talking about? Otherwise, it's
Well, I could jump a little bit, maybe just jump start. And I'm a little bit the contrarian because I'm coming from a completely different angle, kind of network transmissions here. So we're looking at a lot of things of solving the location problem. And we're coming at it from the fact that we don't have the ability to put sensors necessarily every place, everywhere, and we'll have some smarter phones and some less smartphones and a whole kind of a heterogeneous environment of devices. And so we're looking at developing digital twinning of the world and keeping what we think of as like a location register. Just as we did with cell phones, we kept track of where every cell phone user was so we could send the phone call to you in the right cell. We're looking at a world, especially around IoT and applications in AR. We're looking at all the sensors and knowing where they are and informing, if you're familiar with robotics, basically a collaborative SLAM type environment where we invite all the data to come into some local processing facility, keep track of that, and then allow the apps to pull from that. And so you might have on device in this room, if we were augmenting something, you might have it on your device, but we might have already scanned the room, and ideally there would probably be 10 years from now, there will be a server in this building that will maintain photorealistic representations of every room with location pinning, so they know where the ceilings and the floors are. And then the devices then can now pull into that to augment what they're sensing, and then pull from either on-board or off-board compute services that would generate whatever the augmentations might be. And to our technological challenges that we're solving now is we have a lot of problems trying to solve the experience where people will leave it on their face for longer than 10 minutes. It's not just that the apps are bad, but the experience is tough because the latency is high. So when the real world and the virtual world that you're mapping don't line up time-wise, then you get nausea and other discomforts. There's another term called jitter, where the latency shifts. Sometimes there's a little bit of latency, other times there's more latency. Right. And we cause tons of that in our network. Now, the cellular network was originally designed to always work. And so we have a lot of redundancies and backups and checks, and that just throws in all sorts of challenges for AR. And so that's why I kind of lead back and I'll hand it off to the 5G aspect. Is we're going to have a whole new network that is going to be optimized and engineered around delivering low latency and managed latency that will really empower these AR applications.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Like when the bandwidth catches up and you don't have to worry about dropping frame rates. What I would say in terms of gaming, I'm an avid follower of Magic Leap's Twitch channel. So any little drop of information, I'm just like lapping it up. And they've talked about gesture recognition, head sort of tilt recognition. So I feel like it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I know, you can hack a HoloLens to kind of get the gestures in there. And honestly, I'm not like a Microsoft advocate. I'm trying to get a job at Google. But the HoloLens, if you get a chance, try the game Fragments. That, for me, is like a great example of devices awareness of your furniture in your house. And, for those of you who haven't played it, detectives kind of walk through your walls and sit on your couch and sit at your coffee table. It detects the height of it, and then they start briefing you on your mission. So that's pretty impressive, as far as like AR games and storytelling. But I feel like Magic Leap 1, ability to do real-time green screen, look up the whale example. That's pretty cool because it's real-time occlusion. So I don't know. That's some stuff I'm excited about.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the applications you guys are working on in AR. Is it all entertainment? I love hearing some of the more industrial versions. There's social causes, lots of different things. So who wants to share some of the things they're working on?
You want me to? Okay. Well, it's hard. I was just going to say, related to Microsoft and HoloLens, I know they're working really hard also on object recognition, not just what's the shape of that chair, but it's also, we know it's a chair and we know how it functions. And that's...
The solution is actually not, it's a combination of pattern recognition with object recognition, so that you're doing a combination of both. That way you can actually see the imprint of the hand and know that your hand up is up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the solution.
That's the solution. So once everything in our physical world is digital, and once we have the semantic value, we understand what it actually means and how it can be used. That's a very magical point. And I don't know when we get to there, but I know there are a lot of people working on it. I just read today, this is a little off subject, but Google Lens has just announced a new product. It's called, I've forgotten what it's called, but you can, I really love that jacket you're wearing. So I can hold up my phone and Google Lens will identify the designer and show me on the internet how I can buy that article of clothing. It's like, oh my goodness, now we're gonna have everybody randomly taking pictures of people they don't know on the street so they can check out the clothing. So in terms of the types of products we're working on, well, I have to tell you, I can't talk specifics, but we just started working on something that I am an American history nutcase, and so we got a call from a vendor who wants to use AR in a battlefield setting, and there are many different ideas that are appropriate for that, but it's exciting because, how do you get kids interested in a revolutionary, Fort Ticonderoga? They don't know anything about it. They have no context. How do you get them excited about actually visiting Fort Ticonderoga and revealing the story to them as they walk around? And so we're actually going to be able to augment battlefield scenes use a timeline. What did it look like at the beginning of the battle, middle, end? We could say, okay, I just want to look at the Americans. No, I just want to look at the, I just want to look at the colonists from Massachusetts. I mean,
So it's educational.
It's educational.
It's not a game,
you can
an
apply
educational
all
game.
kinds of filters, and you can show them, the trajectory of the artillery. They didn't have artillery.
It's like a new
then
walking,
musket.
new walking tour instead of like putting on headphones.
Yeah,
and-
yeah. So that's something we're working on, and I'm super excited about it. For me, it's a dream project.
So we've done 2 projects, proof of concept projects, that are similar. We could talk about it later. One was
Okay.
for the Icelandic government. They had a part of Iceland where there was a famous Viking battle, and they were looking to recreate that. And we had a similar solution to a historic airport in Berlin, where the Berlin airlift took place. And so we developed a proof of concept around putting basically, those coin-operated telescopes that were prevalent, like
Yes.
where we put those stations in, we lock in those locations, can put screens in there, and then having the battles basically animated in 3D, and then allow people to come in from those different vantage points, and then we're able to track and inform the render based on where the glasses were pointed to create what was happening from that particular angle. And so if you
That's
saw a
very
plane
cool.
up here, you could aim up and you could see a plane, and we could augment with sound. So these are things we can do now. The challenge is the cost. Most of these things came out of our work, and just talking about things we can talk about. We did a lot of work using drones, and using drones as the proxy for people, and you talked about image recognition. And so we've done that. It's very possible. There's a lot of good libraries on image recognition that you can pull, and you can identify things. Our challenge was pulling video feeds off the drone. You can think of it off the lenses. You have to take the video feed, you have to get it processed somewhere. And you don't know necessarily what you're processing it for, because you might not know what you're looking for. I'm looking for one of 100 things. And so our challenge was, and that's where the 5G comes in, is having the bandwidth and the low latency to take my real-time feed, get it into the network, get it analyzed, have things identified, maybe boundary boxes animated, and then sent back as a video feed to me so I can watch these identifications and follow them. And these things have latency, and there's issues. I'm sure Google's, we were talking about a little bit, they got guys working on the network architecture and the compute necessary to do this in the timely fashion, but these things are being worked on now, and we have prototypes running that are doing this type of stuff.
We just launched a project about 3 days ago. It's on the App Store. It's called Imaginary Friend. And we worked with the Pediatric Brain Tumor Society to use augmented characters in hospitals all over the U.S. to encourage kids as they were going to surgery and, lift their spirits. So we just, launched that. And I was at the hospital recently, and we kind of did a mixed reality shoot with the kids and the characters, and interviewed some of the kids, and they actually said that these augmented characters were actually able to cheer them up and lift their spirits as they're going through this really tough time. And I think that was a real learning experience for all of us to just see the power of augmented reality to use it in that context. So yeah, if you get a chance, check it out. It's Imaginary Friend on the App Store.
And similar story, we're working at Google on something called AR stickers, which is taking kind of the best of 3D animation and creating these interactive moments within the Pixel camera where you can drop, for example, we worked with Star Wars, you can drop a stormtrooper into your scene on the table, on the ground, and you can drop another character, and they recognize each other, and they have an interaction that plays out in real time. And we found that to be incredibly successful use of both ARCore, understanding the environment, and just interactive kind of game storytelling.
And these are optical fiducials, in essence, that are...
These are 3D objects, essentially, that have
but the markers
animations.
that help the system understand it.
ARCore, kind of the underlying technology, uses software to kind of understand the environment and has lighting estimation and motion tracking to make it really look grounded in your environment. And now we're just continuing to invest and make the experience more interactive and understand the context of where it is even more so that you can create your own little scenes and ideally share that out across Snap and Facebook and other places where you share. But similarly, we had a story come to us from a mom whose kid was on the autism spectrum and it was hard to communicate, and they were using the Stormtrooper and other characters to actually communicate with each other, like really opened up his mind.
awesome.
And the power of AR is really amazing.
Well, speaking of the technologies, let's talk a little bit more about the technologies that are underlyingly being developed to support it. In my discussions with each of you, things came up like photogrammetry and volumetric capture, and it sounded like we were making movies here, and it sounded like that AR is really kind of moving in a big direction, maybe costly because of this, but let's talk technologies underlying it.
Who wants to go?
Kicking off, or?
Well, I mean, one of the, talking about AR stickers, like one of the most expensive parts is the creative and production process of developing these objects that move and have animations. It's like developing game characters, and that's just costly. And the scale isn't there yet to have brought down the price of creating those objects. But I think as we all continue to invest in this space, there'll be more companies that are kind of purpose-built to do that work, that production work, and the cost will come down.
Yeah. I've been sort of prototyping in Facebook AR Studio, Snapchat WorldLens, HoloLens, ARKit, ARCore, and as you can see, there's a lot of SDKs out there right now, so it's very fragmented. I think that technology-wise, the thing that I'm most excited about is volumetric and live action AR. I recently directed a shoot at ADI in Culver City, and it's kind of a volumetric capture studio. There's 40 cameras around. We put our talent there, and then we captured the content, which we're using later on in an app experience. But there's these studios being built out for live action and AR capture, and you can just imagine, where things are going to go in the next few years, technology-wise, when everybody can kind of scan themselves and tell stories in an AR environment. You've got Intel Studio in LA, Microsoft in San Francisco, you got ADI. So it's almost like we're seeing a new form of Hollywood emerging sort of before our eyes, and it's super exciting to see. But everything, SDKs and platforms are still really, really segmented. I think web AR is going to be really interesting because it's going to kind of make things a little bit more ubiquitous, but I think we're about 6 months to maybe a year away, depending on what Neil says.
I have all the answers. But talk about 5G, with the holograms and volumetric.
Yeah, so how we get to these topics is the same topics but from a different angle. We want to have shared AR experiences in the same public spaces. And the challenge is if you do it for one person, you can just make assumptions that the wall is exactly that there, and that's I'm just going to render things based on that. But if you start going to have multiple users sharing that same experience, you have a challenge of, well, where is that experience really need to be? And then when you think about it from a camera sensor perspective, you're looking at it from a pixel. I mean, really fine granularity of how do I float some balloon, some augmented balloon in the middle of this room when we're all looking at it from our own angle, and it's in the same place, and it's not shifting. So we had a big problem with Z-axis. How high are things? Because there's not good databases. You can go to Google Maps and you can find a picture of where any spot on the ground is, but there's not good ability to find out, well, how high is that? 151.3 feet, or is that 151.275 feet? And so we're trying to figure those things out, and most of the standard technologies don't help. GPS.
We did it. Clay was mentioning the cloud anchor,
Yeah.
where basically you share a space, the camera captures all the environment, so we understand key points and where you are.
And that gets right to the photogrammetry. So we've been working a lot around using photogrammetry basically as that game level, the map level that people use, and then we pin that to known locations.
Can you just define that in case anybody...
Oh, so the photogrammetry is a technology where the user will take a large number of photos, of regular standard 2D photos, but the computer, using AI type software, can stitch those photos together into a three-dimensional photograph. So think of like the Grand Canyon, and you can see the edges and how the cliffs come down, and it might go down on the bottom, and it comes back up, and you can take this and you manipulate it like you would use in a Unity or an Unreal game engine. It is now a level. And so we can put that into what we call our edge processor, map that to specific lat longs, and now we can say we're going to generate that balloon at exactly what we think this position is, and when we render it for all the other users, we'll render it as if it's in that position. It may not be exactly right, but that's what the goal is. So that takes a lot of work to figure out what that is, and we can inform it with a lot of technology. So it's not just one, but maybe every phone is telling some central place, this is where we think that balloon is. And so we're looking at how we can be kind of a central and important part of that ecosystem, is to kind of house some of these sensor and location and then the transport functions around the AR. So that's kind of one of the big technological things. And then back to the edge processing. To reduce the latency, we can't go back through the cloud to your traditional data centers. They're CPU oriented, they're utilization oriented, so they want to have maximum utilization. So there are queues and waits, and there's pings and retransmissions, and all those things will ruin the experience. And so the edge, the network edge compute facilities, which everybody's looking at doing, and DT and all major carriers are involved here, and the big hyperscale guys are doing that also, are going to move key intensive applications, either data-wise. For example, if you have a photogrammetry of this building, but I also want to layer in the CAD/CAM system from the builder, and so that I could augment in where the electrical lines are, or where the plumbing lines are, or where the fire things are. Those are huge data sets that aren't easily transported, and so they need to be someplace that's readily accessible, that could be merged with these photogrammic technologies to create these augmentations. So these things are designed, committed to their first generation type thing, so they'll evolve. But the carriers are going to be rolling those things out, and we'll see those. They're already test bed locations. We are working with one of our vendors in Pittsburgh that already has one that's supporting the hockey stadium. And so we can supply these very fast fiber supplied services into the hockey stadium. And the vision is that you'd have that everywhere. Every main street will have that capability.
Well, what's so interesting about that is just yesterday, I mean, how relevant this is and how quickly it's happening. Just yesterday, we were asked to put together a proposal for a major sports stadium because they wanted their people who were attending at the sports stadium to be able, oh God, that's my phone, to be able to send where they are, their place in the stadium, to all of their friends.
Yeah.
And so, this is all very relevant. I apologize. I knew I should have turned
It's the
this thing
Yankees.
off. Oh, my gosh. So the other thing I wanted to say about some of the technological issues that are out there, I mean,
Or opportunities, too.
or opportunities, and you talked about it, which is the fragmentation. So how difficult it is. Imagine you're Caterpillar, you're a big industrial giant, and you don't really want to have to select, oh, I'll support HoloLens. You'll do it if you have to, but you would much rather have a technology, a product that would work across platform, right? No matter what they happen to be using in India, they would be able to use this training application that we've designed. So it's a huge problem. There are a few beginning sort of cross-platform efforts. One of the things that we've done is take all of these myriad SDKs and put them together so it's a little bit easier when you're designing. Oh, I need to pull up ARKit. Oh, no, now I need this SDK. I need Vuforia. Now I need ARCore. So that helps the process a little bit from a developer's point of view, but it's still a big problem for the user. What platform do you want to be on? I hope we deal with some of this fragmentation going forward.
Yeah, one quick thing to add. Last year it was kind of all VR. We're talking a lot more about AR this year, but I think it's really smart to sort of not leave VR, by the wayside, because you can create VR content, drop out the background, and you're essentially, part of the way there for an AR experience. So I think smart pipelines also play into content creation. So if you can kind of create something that's like VR headset, and then have that all the way like work down to a Facebook AR Studio or Snapchat World Lens, and also an app, and do that with like a sort of one-time content creation in a game engine like Unity or Unreal. I think that that's like a decent way of sort of solving the fragmentation right now.
Man, there's some interesting examples of that out in the wild. Turner on TBS did something with Final Space that it's an animated show on TV. There's an AR experience that kind of jumps off the screen, and then there's a VR kind of companion piece, and it's like the immersive storytelling spectrum and hitting users at each of those points when they're ready for it. I think it's very
Speaking
cool.
of storytelling, by show of hands, how many of you are either producers or content creators in the audience? Okay, so for all of you, let's talk about storytelling and content creation using the AR platform. How does it differ? What advice could you give or shed some light on developing your story with an AR platform?
I've been doing it for probably 2 or 3 years. Like, headsets change, everything sort of changes very quickly. Luckily, I've gotten very familiar with Unity, and that's allowed me to try out my experiences. So if I'm, doing experience design on an augmented reality project, you really have to try these things out, walk through it, define the interactions. So the very simple answer to it is, as a creator, you need to be in your creation and you need to try it out, because what looks good on paper, what looks good on a flat screen, could be, could fail inside of AR.
Anybody else want to add into that? Storytelling,
Well,
content creation.
Yeah, let me go a little skew in that. So
Yeah.
we've talked to a bunch of sports guys too. And as technologists, I'm not technically a storyteller. But what we're being asked to work with is that they want to expand the story. And for you storytellers out there, there's a huge new opportunity that you don't have to recreate movie or TV or digital bites in an augmented reality kind of way. They're looking at taking their product and turning it into brand lifestyles. And so the sporting franchises that we've talked to in the kind of the stadium type context, they want you not just to come to the stadium and experience it for 2 or 3 hours. They want you to go home and experience it the next day and the next day and the next day, and they want to integrate additional experiences, additional gameplay. I was recently demonstrating a soccer system in Barcelona, and FC Barcelona was interested in doing an augmented reality experience with the players because they don't have a chance to take their players all over the world. They're playing in Europe, and maybe they could go to South America on a tour once, but how do they cover Asia and flying back and forth? They have no way to service their fans. And so there's a whole slew of new kinds of storytelling. It's not just new storytelling techniques, but new kinds that these brand owners are clamoring to get to. So they can be game engagement, product engagement, advisory engagement, just different ways to bring you in daily touch is what these guys are very interested in.
Our first AR game was called Crayola Color Blaster, and it started out, we thought we'd make, this is, about 3 years ago, so we thought we would make a big room-size coloring book. Oh, this would be fun with kids, and we would use Crayola's brand. And we built it out, and to your point, it was not fun. So we said, okay, we're going to scratch that. And then we thought, well, what's fun? Okay, zombies, you fall back on the old tropes. Okay, shooting zombies, that's fun, and we'll shoot them with colors, so it'll be okay with kids. So we went down that path, and one of the first things we learned is that in AR, you don't know what the environment is in which people will be experiencing your app. And so that makes it very challenging. So in our office, we had a nice big space like this. It was empty, and our game played beautifully. And then our Google producer said, I'm living in this tiny, cramped little apartment in San Francisco, and I'm trying to play your game, and it's not, there's a lot of occlusion issues, it's not much fun, so we need to fix this. So then we came up with an idea where you're just sort of rotating in place, spinning, and the hordes come, and you're blasting them, and there are many levels and leaderboards and all that kind of stuff. So it turned out there are multiple ways to play the game. There's a sort of the story mode that allows you to experience the story. You unlock the story by finding treasure chests, by interacting with things in the environment. That's how the story gets told. Or you have the arcade mode where you're basically spinning around and shooting color as fast as you can. So that was our first experience. It was with developing an AR game.
Who brought up the term spatial narrative to me at one point? One of you, was that you who brought it up, Clay?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. I think that, when you're creating immersive stories, you really have to think about it in terms of space and time. So, traditional medium, it's sort of linear, but if you're doing an activation that's a story in a retail location or location-based storytelling, you have to be able to direct the user as they, move around that space. And there's some formulas that we've been kind of like working with, and it's basically when somebody reaches a trigger point, you can trigger an interaction or an animation, but you basically sort of put this all together to create a spatial narrative. I would say that it's really, really hard to create these things unless you're actually walking around doing it. But it's really similar, I think, to designing like a theater set and, having people sort of be part of this immersive theater. That's probably the best way I can explain it. But it sort of like gives a lot of new opportunities for storytellers to kind of define what that medium is, because I think people are still exploring it, and it's really about, moving through space and time and telling a story.
Neil?
One of the things that jumped to my mind through this whole conversation is how cool it is to be based in LA right now. It's like the hybrid of tech now because of Snap and Facebook and Google's huge investments in the space, and always obviously entertainment and storytelling. And I think there's just this moment where there's so much prototyping and trying to figure out how to tell stories across VR and AR, and LA is like a really special place for that.
No, that's great.
Exciting.
Okay, what advice can you give to brands on how to jumpstart their efforts into AR?
Did you want to?
No, hang on 1 second. Let's get to this, and then we'll come back to questions.
I want to move on to the next subject because it was relevant to your storytelling question.
Okay, we'll go right ahead.
Well, you're talking about coloring books and stuff like that, and we're talking about little kids that would be interested in that particular subject, and just coming from understanding the latency issues and how that makes kids nauseous, has there been a kind of a resistance to parents allowing kids to even experience this? And is there a sweet spot for the age that AR really is geared towards? And do we have any solutions to maybe limiting exposure or solving those problems so that little kids 3 to 7 could experience this?
Well, I'm a developmental psychologist, so I had my PhD before I went into interactive gaming over 30 years ago, so I can answer that question. And we're not talking about VR, where I think it's a different, where you're enclosed in a head-mounted display. We're not talking about that. So with AR, in my experience, one of the biggest issues with child-related content is that these are expensive phones, and children drop phones, and parents are a little bit reluctant to turn over their $1,000, new iPhone to their child, and for good reason. So that's one of the obstacles that we deal with kids' content and AR. I think that children. If you've ever seen a kid like the Hungry Caterpillar, have any of you seen that app?
Great AR.
Great AR app, great book, very exploratory, which is really good for younger children, right? Younger kids, it's great to give them a sandbox and let them play around. As they get older, closer to school age, 5, 6, 7, they start wanting levels, and then they start wanting more structure in their game to keep them playing. And to keep their interest. But the younger kids, like with the Caterpillar example, it's just charming and magical, really. That's what AR, it's magical. When in our little product, when they see that zombie for the first time, the ballerina zombie, it's just really special to see that response. So I don't have any problems personally with having kids, when parents are okay with them using their phone, to having them experience augmented reality experiences. By the time they're 4, they understand the difference between real and not real. So I have never seen a 4 and older kid say, "Oh, is that real?" No, they understand it's virtual. So you don't have that issue either. And then as they get older, I think you see Pokemon in that sweet spot of really like 7 to 10 is just sort of magical.
Plus Nancy.
Yeah.
Hang on one second. I think Clay wanted to follow up on that. Then we'll get to questions. I have one more question, and then we can
Just in reference to what he's asking, it's the same.
see what happens when you open up the can of question worms early. This is what happens. Actually, let's let Clay talk for a minute, and then we can go back to it. Go ahead, Dahl.
I'll keep it short. So when designing for kids, I think it's really important to direct their attention. It's hard enough to direct an adult's attention. So a lot of like visual cues, and then also sound is huge to cue them. Yeah, and I would love to see Toca Boca explore all their stuff in AR because I think it would be amazing.
I just add on, we're quickly coming out of Germany and having different kinds of laws on privacy and social responsibilities. We've been more sensitive to the emotional manipulation potential of AR and VR. That, especially VR, but also AR, with when you put elaborate sounds and stuff, you can be much more impactful in the experience, and that's the value of it. But there's a lot of people, for good and bad purposes, doing emotional manipulation in the programs. And so I can point you towards Jeremy Bielenson up at Stanford University. He's got a whole program in the communications group about racial sensitivity and other kinds of things that are positive messaging, but it could also be negative. Bielenson is he's a professor at Stanford.
He just published a book on empathy and
Yes.
mixed reality, so you could look that up.
Yeah,
on
so
that.
that would be my bigger concern for people in general. I agree with you that it's cost prohibitive to get in too much trouble right now with the kids. If you look at a HoloLens price, you're not going to get. You're not going to. I don't even let adults hold those things typically. I'm placing it on their heads and doing everything myself.
Right. All right. So, what advice could you give to brands to help them jumpstart their efforts into AR? What would be your best advice?
I do it all the time. So I think a brand might not buy off on a standalone app straight out because it costs a lot to make that, and then you have to port it. Even Unity porting from ARCore to ARKit is a challenge. But I think that leveraging social AR makes a lot of sense. So exploring something that's sort of a very light AR experience in Facebook AR Studio. They also have a integration into Instant Messenger now, so you can have augmented reality characters in Instant Messenger. And then I'm a huge fan of Lens Studio, which is the creator's tool for Snapchat, creating world lenses. That's a great way of doing kind of light AR. There's not a lot of sort of upfront investment involved in that. And they've got things called Snappables, which are games that are very sort of quick and easy. Once you've sort of invested in that sort of light AR experience, you could drive people to the App Store to download something, or you can try, like we're doing right now with not tons of success, to do something in web AR that's really, really cool.
Right. Anybody else?
Yeah, so we've been targeting brands that already have some sort of app presence that's significant, and looking to take AR and make that an augmentation to their existing fan engagement models. And so not trying to invent a whole new thing, but to look at how can we snap on to the existing infrastructure that you have. And then also we're looking much more towards what we call flat AR, so things that are on phones and tablets, as opposed to things that take glass or lenses, just because of the cost. Everybody has a phone already. Soon enough, they'll have the AR built in, and so it's not an incremental cost for them. And so we're looking at that kind of engagement, and that can be built right in or in augment to their existing apps.
All good.
Ariella?
They nailed it.
Any advice you want to give to brands that are looking to get into AR? How do they jumpstart themselves into this whole process?
I think she feels the same.
Yeah.
Like they covered it.
They covered
Oh, okay,
it.
good enough. All right, very good. Okay, so last question. What is really exciting you about the next 6 months? We started with the first 6 months, and now let's think about what's coming. We've talked about tipping points in there somewhere, but what's really getting your heart here for the next 6 months?
What's exciting for me is stuff I touched on, which is just getting AR Core and AR Kit out the door to get the table stakes set, I think was a huge lift. Now we're starting to build in these features like Clay mentioned, like cloud anchors, which enable sharing, and a lot of other things that are on the roadmap, I'm sure, for Apple and definitely for Google, that are going to open up the possibilities for really cool AR experiences beyond just the basic stuff. And I think in 6 months we'll see a whole new set of use cases built on top of those.
Great.
Yeah, cloud is huge. Location-based, the Google Maps API, and being able to put the technology of Pokemon Go, that any brand can create that based on whatever IP they have. They've got Harry Potter, Wizards Unite. They're doing sort of a Pokemon-esque game like that. But yeah, I think the tools are getting a lot more accessible, and when you start combining location-based experiences, cloud AR, and artificial intelligence, it gets really, really exciting.
Great.
So we're seeing a lot of stuff on the industrial front. So just to kind of, again, go a little bit skew, there's a lot of companies that are going to be pushing out applications onto their employees. And that's going to set up a foundation that you can do things. For example, and you could half guess who this would be, but we've been talking with the airplane manufacturer. And as they're looking at building new next generation planes, there's a lot of wiring. The planes are bigger, and they have to have, even for the flight attendants, different control stations across the plane so they can turn the lights on and do stuff. And those things get wired, and those have electronics and displays, and they all add weight, and they add it up mile by mile, year over year, and they see significant costs around that. So they're looking at systems where they might have one control panel and do AR panels, virtual panels, for the rest of the plane, and then empowering the flight attendants with a glass or glass type product to manage these things. And this will just be forced on them. So they won't have a choice. This
Do you
will
think
just
it'll be
happen.
in the next 6 months that'll happen?
Well,
or
you
do
won't see it
think
in the
a little
airplanes
further?
in the next 6 months, but this type of example you will
Right.
see in industrial applications, particularly around digitization and AI applications, where you have a lot of data coming in and everything's going to be wired up. Every oil well, every air conditioner is going to have sensor and data is going to be coming in, and you're going to run out of ways to visualize and to manipulate this data. And so the industrials are now looking at, I'm going to have to do this in 3D, and I'm going to have to create virtual, because there's no way otherwise. I'm going to have stacks or huge databases that people are going to thumb through. I need to move to a more visual, a more natural human interface, and those are coming in, kind of flooding the basement, and that's going to, and we're going to think the house is dry, but at some point, all the rooms on the first floor are going to flood, and
Okay.
then you'll see this B2C explosion.
Great. Okay, we have a couple minutes left, so we'll go back to questions. This lady here.
Yeah, I'm just interested if anybody knows of Disney, for example, which has got the great content for augmented reality. Are they working on anything, maybe with Google or anybody else, to create augmented reality for kids from all ages?
We're doing something with Pixar Fest, and basically it lets the kids sing along with the characters. It should be out soon. It's going to be combining Facebook Instant Messenger with augmented reality to let kids sing along. So Disney has a whole immersive studio. Cartoon Network has a lab. So all this content is definitely coming. It's being created right now.
Another question?
Disney currently has a product that was very successful this past Christmas on the Lenovo Mirage, which is a headset, and you're Star Wars, and so you're fighting with a lightsaber, and so that did very well.
So they are investing in that arena. That's
They
what I
are.
wanted basically to know if they're major, because they have all the characters you can play with, and you don't have to be anywhere.
Yes.
They're investing in experimenting and piloting things,
Yeah.
and they also have the Star Wars experience at the Void, which is a location-based VR experience.
Well, it is 1 o'clock now, everybody, so we'll probably have to wrap it up. But if you have specific questions for the panelists, you can come up and talk to them. Thank you very much. How about a round for the panelists?
Hey there. How you doing?
So
Nice to meet
I
you.
will follow up with you by email, okay?
Yes, we should definitely.